Hey, and welcome to another episode of Crossover Event. I am Chris Cox.
I'm Martin Thomas.
I'm Danni Danger.
And we like to talk about pop culture. Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah.
Because that's what everybody's talking about now.
I mean, come on. It is the internet is like one part cats, one part pop culture discussion.
It is funny to think about how all the geek stuff that you liked, at one time you had to be kind of ashamed of it and talk just amongst your friends. And now it's mainstream to where everybody talks about it now.
Yeah, no, I mean, probably half the people I know are too young to remember when you could get beaten up for wearing like a Superman shirt.
Sure.
And probably would get beaten up for wearing a Superman shirt. Times have changed, indeed. Where now the same people who would have beaten you up are now beating each other up because of minor disagreements about what.
Yes. Yes, the fights now are about just these little micro differences and things. Yes, the thing that made you special before doesn't anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and for the record.
This is a really uplifting pep talk, guys.
For the record. The answer to be special is not being that one person who goes, all superhero movies are bad. Don't be that guy. Come on.
No.
Don't be that person. You're no fun. No one likes that guy. But we are not those people. We love superhero movies. And this week we're going to talk about our very favorite superhero movies of all time.
Sure.
And there were, it's funny. I was thinking about this. Like, can you imagine someone asking you, all right, make a list of the best video game movies ever? And you're like, oh, God.
How much time do you have?
That was what it was like in the 80s. When someone said that for superhero movies, you'd be like, I don't know, there's like two, and then we're really going to have to reach.
Well, but with video game movies, you'd still be sitting there. That's the question you ask an android to short out its electronic brain.
Right. So Kirk would have killed the AI controlling the planet with that question. So we're all going to go around and take turns listing some of our favorites. And it's there's so many more that I would like to talk about that we won't have time for because there's so many great superhero movies now. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to start this round off with an early one, and it was hard to decide between Superman and Superman 2. The first one directed by Richard Donner, the second one directed ostensibly by Richard Lester, who, by the way, and I didn't even realize this, the guy who directed A Hard Day's Night and Help for the Beatles.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, funny. I just rewatched the Criterion of A Hard Day's Night the other day.
So from what I understand,
good movie.
Richard Donner pretty much directed Superman 2.
Okay, so.
But Richard Lester was brought in to quote-unquote finish it.
So Richard Donner directed 75% of it when, and I didn't actually know this, they filmed Superman 1 and 2 at the same time.
Yes.
They were like, we're going to have this so we can just put it out the next year. But then stuff happened, the production was put on hold, and when they eventually came back to doing it, Donner was kind of, he got there were disagreements. I don't know what happened exactly, but the point is, and people disagree to this day of who exactly is to blame for what. But either way, Richard Lester was brought in, which is to say he was actually the second AD the entire time anyway, and apparently had been working so closely with him that they consider themselves directing partners on the film in the first place. So to say that it's one or the other who directed it, I mean, it was both of them.
Okay.
But either way, it really does hold up. There's only one sequence in that whole movie I can think of that you watch and you go, what was that?
Well, there's points when Superman suddenly displays powers that were never discussed before.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And Family Guy did a bit on it where he pulls off his Superman logo and throws it at one of the Kryptonians, and it wraps him up for a second, but then just dissolves, and you're like, what was the point of that? It's kind of gross, really. What is that?
Wait, you could have done that the whole time?
But, for an early superhero film, this changed comics.
Oh, absolutely.
Period. Hell, it changed Superman movies to come because introducing General Zod and the whole idea of the Phantom Zone, bringing back these Kryptonians and stuff. I mean, that was a big deal, and it has continued on to this day, most recently, and the actual new Superman film.
Oh yeah, even in the Superman and Lois, because prior to Superman 2, nobody really thought about General Zod. He'd been a villain before, but not somebody major that always came back, and that put him at prominence. So where he's right, just a hair below Lex Luthor as far as Superman villains go.
And Terrence Stamp as the guy. Oh my God, he's one of my favorite screen villains. Of all time.
Of all time.
No question. Just so fantastic. But there's so many good things about it. But there's so many things that when you look into it, you're like, wow, how did this end up being any good? Because a lot of the people wouldn't return. Like Gene Hackman was like, I'm sorry, I'm pissed off about this whole Donner situation. I'm not coming back.
No kidding.
And so they had to use stand-ins
Oh, wow.
for him. And it happened with several actors. John Williams got in a huge fight with, I think it was Lester. It was like, I'm not doing this. And walked.
No.
They brought in this other guy who was so embarrassed about it, he just basically repurposed the original score and just added some bridges.
You know what? Everything you're saying right now explains Superman 4
Yes.
so much. Because everything you're saying is like, Superman 4 is one of the worst movies. Like, that and Batman and Robin compete for the worst superhero movies.
Ooh, I don't know. It's a tough.
It's a
lot
tough
of
call.
competition. Yeah.
But it was plagued by all of that. People not returning, having to repurpose old footage and music. And I didn't know it started way back then.
It did, but which is arguably the best one. I mean, it's 1, 2, but 2 has got the iconic villains. So
It's, it's so often with some of these movies, you say, oh, well, I like 1 better than 2 or 2 better than 1. And they're really sort of one long movie.
Yeah.
I feel like with that, that's what happens. People will talk about the Avengers movies or the Captain America movies, or really so much of the MCU. You're like, oh, I like this one better than this one. I was like, they're kind of all one long story.
You know, I mean, especially with the Avengers last 2 movies, but we'll get into that, I promise.
Sure.
So my choice has got to be the first Iron Man movie. And this is a bit of a weird choice for me because as a character, I do not love Tony Stark. I am Team Cap all the way.
Oh, you're not supposed to.
But that movie shaped what we know as the MCU.
Absolutely.
It shaped that formula of introducing. I mean, we're now in phase 4 and we're still copying that formula and putting out new superheroes that people have never even heard of because they don't, even people who read the comics might not have ever heard of. And it all started with this amazing movie. And it really also started that trend of like looking at an actor and being like, oh my God, they cast this so perfectly. That person basically is Tony Stark.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. I remember after seeing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, we were like, oh, I hadn't even thought about Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. Like that, yeah, he should be Tony Stark. I think everyone was saying it.
Well, it was one of those things where we were in the dark ages with superhero movies for so long. And somebody would get cast and you're just like, I guess I'll go with it because I just want a superhero movie.
It's all we got.
It's all we got. It's all we got. And it wasn't until you got casting where I remember the first time when it was announced that Tobey Maguire would be Spider-Man. And I was like, wait, somebody is really looking at this. This makes sense. I dig this. And Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, a hero with substance abuse. I was like, this is so perfect. This has to work.
And that resurrected his career
Yes.
as well. I mean, he took a small paycheck for the first one, but have you ever looked at the list of how much money Robert Downey Jr. has made for all his appearances?
Oh, yeah.
It's like there's one of them, I forget which one, that he walked with over $100 million.
Well, I know that he argued to be in Captain America and Civil War, where he wasn't going to be, and even his appearance in Spider-Man Homecoming, where he's in there for 10 minutes, and he made so many multi-million dollars.
Oh, yeah. It was like $1 million a minute or something like that. It was Bruce Willis prices, basically.
Yeah.
I think that at that time too, what's fascinating to me about that whole situation was he really paved the way for Chris Evans to get recast in another Marvel movie and people to be like, okay, I can see this, because in our memory, he was still Johnny Storm and not a good Johnny Storm, not his fault, but just because that movie was kind of garbage, flaming trash. And so, it was sort of one of those things where it's like, that guy was Johnny Storm, but like the Tony Stark thing was so on point that I'll allow it. And it opened people's minds and allowed Chris Evans to become Cap in everyone's eyes, and he's an amazing Cap. I can't imagine anybody else filling that role.
Yeah, right?
There's a lot of good things you can say about the MCU and the way Kevin Feige, the sort of showrunner for the whole universe, has run things. But one of the best is he's got the best casting directors in the entire world working for him, because it seems like thing after thing after thing, they're like, geez, now I can't picture anybody else playing that role for almost everything.
No, there's never been a better casting director since Andrea Romano on the Bruce Timm universe of voice actors. Something that the first Iron Man brought was not only taking the comic books and superheroes seriously, but also injecting humor along with it, so that humor is it's a bit of a buffer, because if you get too serious with it, you start to look at it, you're like, this is kind of silly. It could break down. But having the humor in it just enough to where you're still in it, but you kind of, just alleviated some. It's a perfect mix.
And Marvel characters are always sort of this mix of pathos and comedy. And Tony Stark, in a huge way, I mean, this guy dealt with a lot of trauma from the very beginning,
Sure.
including dealing with alcoholism and what have you. And this sort of, although they never address the alcoholism thing in the Marvel films,
not really.
I mean, maybe he comes back to life, which eventually he's going to go, man, I need a new mega yacht. Maybe they'll do a demon in a bottle storyline at that point. But I really like the way they pulled it off in especially the first Iron Man movie.
Oh, yeah.
Getting that right, going from this brash, obnoxious rich guy to this guy who starts to learn what responsibility is, but not losing the part that makes him funny about being a brash, obnoxious rich guy.
It's also one of those things where, like I always say, the grandfather of the new superhero movies is Blade. And what they took with Blade was a character who was a C, maybe even a D-list character that nobody really cared about, but they put a lot of love and development into. And because he was so low on the totem pole, there weren't a lot of people to go like, that's not right. You can't do that. And Iron Man was an A-list character who had been looked at like a C-list character. So they sort of had that same leeway to do that. And now he's up there with everybody else in everyone's mind.
I still remember when they announced the movie and it was going to be this huge movie everyone going, I don't know. Well, we should have known.
So for my movie, I'm going to go a little ways different from you guys. I went to look through my list and see what was different. I'm going to go with Into the Spider-Verse, the animated movie that is, I'm going to just say it, it's the best Spider-Man movie that's ever come out.
It's the best animated superhero movie. If you ask me.
The best animated superhero movie, and as much as I love some of the live action Spider-Mans, I was like, this is Spider-Man at its best, because not only like, hey, I'm excited like everybody else to see Miles Morales in it, but this movie had really so much love and I don't know if innovation is the word, but it was just fresh. It was so much about it where, man, we could just do a regular animated Spider-Man, but they did deep dives and the dialogue is amazing and a whole brand new art style that they brought to it, to where it's a movie that, outside of it being a comic book movie, just as an art piece, you can watch it over and over.
Beautiful.
No matter how many times you watch it, you'll see new things in it.
It feels, and the word I kept thinking of was electric.
Electric. That's a good word for
There's
it.
something about it that just feels electric. I remember hearing at one point, there's a color that they've said is a real thing that you can only see under the influence of psychedelic drugs. But it's considered a real color.
Okay.
Your mind can only kind of imagine it.
Let's
and
test
that's,
it for science.
That's what this movie is.
Okay.
Is that color.
It is that.
And it is psychedelic. I mean, I don't do drugs like that, but like, if I did, I would want to watch that movie while I was doing it because it's insane. It's like
I
broke the wall of the parallel world superhero thing, which now is like literally everything, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah, I know.
Spider-Verse did it first.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to do multiverses because this way we can do everything. But this is a movie that did it and it kept it tight. It's easy to open that door and just do whatever you want, but it's another thing to have it structured and yet feel like anything can happen. It brings in Peter Parker, an older Peter Parker, as
Peter B. Parker.
Yes, as a terrible mentor to our new young Spider-Man, but doesn't let him take over. That would have been really easy to do. And the movie has so many emotional beats that hit home. Bring the just little things. I'm sure you guys have seen it because everybody's seen it at this point. But just there's so much that goes on with the Prowler. How complicated that relationship is, and with his death, how you feel that. The
Kingpin is another example. They handled that really well. He's a very sympathetic villain.
Oh yes, and so many artsy takes on it that don't go so far that I can't relate to this. It's amazing, and just even talking about it now, I want to rewatch it again.
Yeah,
it's one of the best superhero movies ever made.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't believe it, except once again, the guys who directed it, and I'm blanking on their name.
Miller and Lord.
Yeah, everything they do is a project you're like, this isn't going to work.
I know.
And then it always works.
I know.
Like
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball.
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball.
Oh my God, I loved it.
You're like, how is this
I'd
good?
read that book to my kids so many nights, and it took 10 minutes. And I was like, how do you make this into a full movie? And sure enough, they did it.
Oh my God, it was so good. I loved that short story as a kid. And I did not realize up until I was this many days old when I realized that that was the same director, same pair of directors.
Oh, yeah.
That makes so much sense.
Well, I'm going to do one here that I know has been a little bit damaged with some of the much later sequels that were made to it, even though for years and years we bemoaned together so many times. God, I wish they would make a sequel to Unbreakable. You know, maybe someone else other than M. Night Shyamalan could direct it, though, right?
Well, maybe if he'd done it right after,
Yeah.
but not so many years after the fact.
Well, I mean, that was the thing for me, and I know not everybody feels this way, but Unbreakable is the last really great Shyamalan film. Like his first two films, unassailable. But after that, it's a big drop off.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And it's also notable that it's the first time that someone did a big superhero movie where it was like, what if superheroes were in the real world? What if there were like actually, how would that work in our world? And I remember just being blown away by it. Bruce Willis reminding us that every once in a while he'll turn in a just tremendous performance in something when he gives a shit.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I think he's largely retired at this point,
I think so,
except
too.
for appearing on like direct-to-DVD red box movies, co-starring.
If you pay him enough, he'll show up. He won't act, but he'll show up.
He's probably fought Neil McDonough in like 4 direct-to-video movies at this point. But yeah, Unbreakable was it was creepy as hell. It was kind of scary. It was so neat the way you pieced it together, because the first time we saw it, we knew nothing about it, because the marketing for it was very like, we're not going to tell you a damn thing about what this is, because The Sixth Sense was so big, all they needed to do was say the new film by M. Night Shyamalan. And we're just like, what is this? And you're really not till like halfway through the movie where you're like, oh crap, this is a superhero movie.
You don't know for sure until the very end.
Yeah. And, I mean, Samuel L. Jackson coming in as like the supervillain. And, he is bigger than life, but in a way that still makes him seem plausible, and it makes sense for him to be that way because he's actually a comic book nerd.
Right.
He wants to play into the tropes of being a supervillain. Unfortunately, I can't think of anything good to say about the spin-off and official sequel.
I mean, there's people who like them, or at least like the one with the Beast. I'm not a fan myself. Split. Yeah, thank you. I'm not a fan, but I get if people like those. It's just that with Split, there was so much excitement about, hey, bringing it back and picking up the story again, and where can this go? And unfortunately, Glass was a huge disappointment all around. But that aside, this Unbreakable was groundbreaking. Once again, we were coming out of the dark ages where nobody took superheroes seriously, and here was one where not only did he take it seriously, but he slipped it under everybody's radar, and just like, oh yeah, it's my new horror film. Oh, psych!
It paved the way for Nolan's Batman films.
Sure.
Which were very much trying to do something similar. Like, what if Batman was in the real world? How would that work?
How would it work?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with one of my personal favorites that I have a deep emotional attachment to it, because anytime I'm having a crap day, I can put this movie on and it just like fixes my mood. I'm going to say Shazam, because I did not expect it to be good at all. I was like, oh God, DC is reaching into the far corners of their universe, and this is going to be heartbreaking. And they're also like, they can't call him Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel is already a thing in the MCU. So like, what is even going to happen here? And I just loved it. I loved how self-aware it was. I loved how hilarious and good it was. I love that they took Mark Strong, aka Mean Stanley Tucci, and made him the villain.
That's good. I like
because he's awesome. I love the ending, and I love the fact that this is a Christmas movie, because most Christmas movies now, as we get older, are pretty problematic and not as fun to watch. And I like having more good Christmas movies that feel a little bit more modern and fun and exciting. And this one technically qualifies as a Christmas movie.
I'm so glad that you listed Shazam, because I still hear people who are like, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, I don't know what movie you saw, because I had a blast watching that, and I did not expect to. The only thing going into that really had me at all excited was the lead actor, because
Zachary Levi.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was in Chuck,
Yeah.
and boy, did I like that show Chuck
Yeah, I
a
used to
whole lot.
He
Love
is
Chuck.
just a peach.
Yeah.
You can't see him and not want to be like, boop.
I don't know why him and the guy who plays Jim from The Office haven't played brothers in something.
No, right?
It feels like they're kind of the same person.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
But yeah, Shazam is super fun. It's super colorful. He's one of those characters I sort of like, with reading, just don't read a lot of it, right? I know you.
I always
yeah.
loved Shazam.
Yeah.
Or Captain Marvel when I grew up. Because naming him Shazam means he can never tell anybody who his name
I
is.
know. It makes no sense.
Well,
Who are
another
you?
thing-
I'm Shazam.
They
Oh
totally
wait, I'm
did
Billy
that in the
Batson again.
movie.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That was the other thing, is that they totally managed to film an entire 90-minute movie without picking a name. And throughout the movie, they're like, he's Captain Thunderbolt. He's
Yeah,
Captain
yeah,
Sparkle
yeah.
Fingers. He's
Yeah.
the Red Cyclope. And it's just like this running gag through the whole movie
Sure,
that is
sure.
absolutely amazing. And also, they get really great bonus points for the casting of the kids and the Marvel the Marvel family appearing at the end, like him sort of learning to accept family and hand over that situation. But the girl who plays adult Darla is the older sister from Eve's Bayou, which is like one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion.
good
And
movie.
she's so talented. You can like see her acting as a child. Like as a child, she is better than most adult actors. And so to see her playing Darla really was just really cute for
Well,
me.
something that I loved about the movie was that it showed foster parents being good people.
And that never
And
happens.
that never happens.
Yeah.
Foster parents and religious figures are never portrayed well in movies. And this was one where, like, man, this would be a cool foster home to grow up in.
Right. And of course, Zachary Levi gets the official Tom Hanks Award, of which very few have been handed out, of great performances by grown men playing someone with the mind of a teenager.
Oh, yeah, that's
inside
right.
of them.
Oh, my
And
God.
getting that excitement and that just jubilance of like, oh my God, I can do all this stuff now.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
And it also feels like before the Shazam movie was made, everybody was like, oh, The Rock should play Black Adam. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It was just like a fan casting thing. And the success of Shazam and how good it was made it possible for a Black Adam movie to actually be a thing.
Oh, Danny, it wasn't just fans saying that. We went to a San Diego Comic Con and sat in Hall H with a panel for The Rock for what was the
Fast and the Furious 13.
No. It was the remake of Escape to Witch Mountain,
Oh, yeah.
which
yeah.
was terrible.
It was terrible.
But
No.
there he talked about playing Black Adam.
Yeah.
And this is a decade before they even made Shazam.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been wanting that part for a while, which I'm kind of like, I know you're kind of a tertiary dork, not as much as Vin Diesel is.
Yeah.
He's a straight up Dungeons and
Right,
Dragons
right,
kind of nerd. But like, who told you about Black
And
Adam?
the Rock is just an insane workaholic that's ready to jump on any role that's open.
Yeah. But I mean, Shazam made that possible for him, and for like a second Shazam movie is going to be like Mary Marvel is somebody that I never thought I would see on the big screen,
Sure.
and I'm just beside myself with glee that it's a real thing that's happening.
So my second movie on this list is Super, directed by James Gunn and starring Rainn Wilson as the Crimson Bolt. And just like with Unbreakable, where we talk about realistic superheroes, here we have a guy where, like, the thing about Batman is everybody's like, well, Batman's kind of insane. With the Crimson Bolt, he's actually delusional. He's had a hot wife who's left him for a drug dealer, and a religious figure speaks to him in a psychotic break, and he decides to become a superhero. And he doesn't have powers, but he goes around stopping crime with a big pipe wrench. And sometimes it's serious crimes, and sometimes it's cutting in line at the movies. And I just loved how this movie, I mean, you say it's disturbing. It is. It's James Gunn.
It's upsetting.
As he can be, because it really takes on the kind of mentality that makes somebody dressed in a costume going after crime, and just how deadly this can be. It's a dark comedy for sure. There's a point where Ellen Page, who works at a comic book store, is fascinating with him and fashions her own costume, become his unsolicited sidekick Bolty, and there's scenes with him looking out, patrolling the area, just camped behind a dumpster, waiting for crime to happen, until he gets on to the point where he has to take on Kevin Bacon as his drug dealer. I've watched this movie several times. I own it. It is slightly disturbing, but that kind of does it for me.
I mean, if you've seen James Gunn's earlier works,
Yeah,
kind of disturbing is his whole oeuvre.
sure.
I mean, if you saw,
Like if you watch
Slither
Peacemaker, there's moments of that.
Yeah.
It's just that Peacemaker is a little bit more happy fun, and this less so. But I still think it's a great movie.
I had described it to someone once, like, it's if James Gunn in his early period had made Kick-Ass.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, it's one of those where when I saw Kick-Ass, I was like, yeah, you're not doing it right.
Okay, so we're going to do a lightning round now, and we're just going to go real quick, do some picks, and talk very briefly, and move on, and then we're going to wrap up the show. Sorry, we can't be here all day, people. Well, I mean, we could, but,
Sure.
We need you to hit the like and subscribe buttons and, like a lot, and get everyone to do that if you want us to stick around for longer. Just saying. Anyway, I'm going to start this one off with, sorry, I'm going to take one of yours, Danny. Thor Ragnarok. My God, that movie just absolutely slaughtered me. It was a combination of all these things from comics that I totally loved, and it's the funniest of all the Marvel films for me by a mile. It's just delightful all the way through.
It's delightful, full of action and world building, and has so much character to it as well. All that on top of being silly and hilarious.
Jeff Goldblum, Valkyrie, indigenous parallel undertones, like Thor's haircut, best Stan Lee appearance. There's so many things this movie has that just
makes you go, why hasn't Taika Waititi been making these movies the whole time?
We are living in that future. We are living in the future that liberals want, and it's Taika Waititi making all the movies.
What about you?
Mystery Men.
Ooh.
Prime Janine Garofalo. Some really great William H. Macy as well. Any movie where Tom Waits plays himself, but just a different version of himself.
Right.
Always a winner. Just a really silly, funny take, a really lighthearted, good time with a nice, happy ending. And actually like some of my favorite Ben Stiller as well, which I could go either way. I either love what he does or I'm like, that's not for me. And I feel like that's him nailing it.
Yeah, sometimes he goes so far into the neurotic, I want to be the new Woody Allen side that you're like, okay, this is the point where you're just annoying.
Yeah.
Other times it works. I actually used to know someone who had one of the original prop bowling balls, Janine Garofalo's with the skull on it.
So
she
good.
had one of the original props.
Eddie Izzard. Oh my God. Like the disco guy. Disco is not dead. Disco is life.
Also, the death of Greg Kinnear's character, Captain Amazing.
So good.
So disturbing.
Yes.
And this movie that's very light, it's just like, this scene is just like, I want to throw up right now.
There's a few moments in that movie that are very visceral. And it's a nice contrast to the just outright silliness of the whole movie.
Yeah. For me, I'm going to go very basic bitch and say that I still think the two best superhero movies tied for first place are The Dark Knight and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. You're like, which one do you like best? It's too close to call. And that Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I still think is the MCU's best movie, in as much as it has everything that they do well. But it's also a political thriller. It was at a time when they really pushed, like, yes, it's a superhero movie, but it's also this as well. And you think, oh, come on, how much can it be? But it touches on, in both movies, they both touch on a lot of issues that we deal with today as far as government overreach and corruption and how much is too much as far as spying into people's lives. I think both movies nail that and nail all their beats perfectly.
I love all the Captain America stuff, and in particular, that's great. But I'm always going to default to Civil War because of that great airport fight scene. That introduced Spider-Man and Ant-Man fighting.
I know.
It's like,
I know.
My only thing with Winter Soldier was I just feel like they were really weird about Black Widow, and they were really weird about trying to force Steve to have a thing with his ex-girlfriend's niece. Like, it just really gave me the Wiggins. That movie just didn't really seem to know what to do with its lady characters. But I love everything else. And it has some of the best fight scenes.
That's a thing in the comics also.
Yeah, it is. But
that doesn't mean it needs to make it to the big screen.
But I don't know. I never heard anybody weirded out by it. But when you say weird about Black Widow, define weird.
She just can't they can't decide if they want her to be flirting with Steve or if they want to like introduce her as this sort of like maybe a romantic character. But it's all just very odd to me.
Well, it's one of these things where I always find it weird that her character is, in comics for the entirety of her existence has been that sexy super spy that uses that for part of her arsenal. And yet in the MCU, everyone is sexless. Like sex doesn't even exist.
It just kind of feels like they were at this weird point where they were like, okay, we introduced her as basically like the hot girl in Iron Man, and now we don't really know what to do with her. And I feel like that it's not so much the sin of Winter Soldier, it's the sin of Marvel just not really knowing what to do with her character.
I'll give you that.
Well,
throughout her storyline.
There were so many other movies we could have said.
Oh, yeah.
I
So
mean,
many.
like The Crow was on my list.
The Incredibles.
The Incredibles.
Yeah.
I'd say, and Avengers, the last two Avengers films.
For sure.
In fact,
But another case of like, this is really all one film.
Yeah.
where like Endgame marks probably the only time at that point where I'd seen a superhero movie and was like uncontrollably weeping. at
Oh
one
yeah,
point.
no. When I saw it, the entire theater was weeping.
Yeah,
At the end.
it was heavy stuff, and it got me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm getting teared up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, that does mark the end of our best of episode. But there's another side to this,
Oh, yeah.
a darker side. The worst superhero movies. And that's what we're going to be talking about in our bonus video at oneofus.net, the site that I run. You can go there if you're a subscriber at the brown coat level or above and watch our bonus video with the three of us talking about the worst superhero movies ever made. But in the meantime, like I said, become a subscriber. Go to Double Toasted to see Martin Thomas.
Thank you.
You can see Danny's work at belleoflostsouls.net.
Screen Fanatic.
Oh, I'm sorry. You moved officially to Screen
We did.
Fanatic? Okay. I didn't realize you were writing for that too.
Oh, yes,
So,
yes.
on
Screen
Screen
Fanatic.
Fanatic, which is where we are now. Make sure you're liking and subscribing Screen Fanatic, the new location of crossover event. And we'll see you next week.